Matthew Huddle. I want you to think about the name Matthew Huddle. Just last month, after being pardoned by Donald Trump for his conduct on January 6th, where he had racked up, was arrested for 4 separate cases after January 6th, this guy tries to pull a gun on a police officer in Indiana. Thank God the officer is alive and defended himself, and Mr. Huddle is not. But what do you think was going through the mind of Mr. Huddle as he was pulled over by a police officer? What do you think he was thinking? He was thinking, I got pardoned. I'm invincible. You can't touch me. The president said that if I commit violence or I'm with people who commit violence, it's okay. So he tried to shoot a cop. That cop almost didn't go home that day because Mr. Huddle was on the streets. So what this amendment is saying is, shouldn't we track the people who were released, 1,500 people, many of them who committed violent acts, many of them who have since been arrested for child pornography. One of them was arrested at the Capitol just a couple days ago. And you know what? If you want to compare to the gentleman from Wisconsin, the Biden pardons to the Trump pardons, I'll put those lists next to each other and see who reoffends. I'll take that bet. I'm going to bet, and I'll bet it all, that you're going to see more of the Trump pardons back in custody because of this sense of invincibility that the president has bestowed upon them. And by the way, the Department of Justice also just said, just this week, that one of the January 6 individuals whose home was searched and explosives and weapons were found, that he can't be charged with those because they're connected essentially as fruit of the poisonous tree of what was done for January 6th. So this is a pardon that goes beyond just what they did on that day. We have allowed the most dangerous people who attacked our Capitol back into our community. By the way, a man who would release 1,500 of the most dangerous people who committed crimes on his behalf will also seek to lock up 1,500 of his most vocal opponents. That's the kind of mindset somebody like that has. But I just want to ask my colleagues, because many of you were with us on the floor on January 6th. I see many of you over there who were. Many of you ran as we were told to leave the floor, and we listened to the instructions of the Capitol Police who were in the chamber, and you heard the on the door outside, and we didn't know what the hell was out there. We saw the chairs stacked up in the press gallery. And we finally were allowed to leave. Some of us had gas masks on. Some of us were carrying the gas mask. I remember Ruben Gallego telling all of us, because we didn't know what the hell to do with the gas mask, how to put it on because he had served in theater. I saw heroic members on your side who had served in theater pushing a desk against the back doors of the chamber. We were all one team that day. We were Team America, and we knew what team the rioters were on. And when we got to that safe location, and in the hours after when we went back to the floor, you thanked the Capitol Police. We thanked the Capitol Police because we knew what they did that day. And now imagine how they feel when they have to stand guard, as they did last week, for a Proud Boys rally that was on the same grounds where those same Proud Boys viciously and violently attacked them. So the very least we could do together as we thank them that day is to tell them, we're going to track the people who were released. We still think you're heroes. We still think that what you did that day is probably the bravest thing you'll ever do in your life and probably one of the bravest acts any of us will ever be a part of and witness to. That's what this amendment seeks to do. I hope we all can pass this amendment, and I hope we can all look the Capitol Police in the eyes when we leave today and go to the floor and know that we still have their back. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the amendment, Ms. Canlonger Dove, and thank you, Representative Swalwell, for that reminder, but I'm confused. And if you want to answer, either of you want to answer me, I'm confused. We were told it was a perfect day. Was it a perfect day?
Still doesn't feel perfect.
No. But we were also told that they were just getting a tour and got lost while on their tour. We were told that there were no guns there. Right? No guns. Nobody had any guns. The police had guns, but nobody in the crowd had guns. Very minor incidents with police, we were also told. But I like this quote. This is my favorite one that came out from all of that. If you committed violence on that day, you shouldn't be pardoned. And who said that? The current Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I agree that the events of January 6th were an abomination. There were violent acts committed that day. There were people, I myself saw a Capitol Police officer with a serious eye injury being led away as I made my way back to the office. But let's be entirely honest about what happened. It was not an insurrection, it was a riot. It disrupted one of the core constitutional functions of this government, the counting of the electoral vote. But the government wasn't moments away from being overthrown by a lunatic wearing Viking horns. The moment that the last of these yahoos was kicked out of this building, we returned and completed our work. Now, there were some who should have had the book thrown at them for vandalism, for assault, and for disrupting our proceedings. But the vast majority of the crowd hurt nobody, broke nothing, and sincerely thought they were merely peacefully exercising their right to protest. I wish that President Trump had been more discerning when he extended pardons to those who perpetrated actual crimes. But I also wish that President Biden had been more discerning in prosecuting people who merely were there, as President Trump said, to peacefully and respectfully express themselves to their elected representatives. I think the Democrats would have far more credibility on this issue if they had made these distinctions and if they had insisted that those who burned our cities to the ground during the George Floyd riots were treated with the same ferocity as so many were in the January 6th riot. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I think I got, I'll go to the ranking member. The ranking member is recognized, and we'll go to Mr. Magoo's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank the gentleman from California for not denying that it was the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, the various white supremacist and white nationalist groups that came to storm the Capitol at the behest of Donald Trump, who said, "Be there, will be wild." It was not Antifa, despite what some of our colleagues have said. It was not a tourist visit, although if it was, that might explain why American tourists aren't that popular these days. And it was not the FBI. And it was not the FBI. Okay, so I appreciate that. I was a little surprised to hear the word discerning in the same sentence as Donald Trump. You wish that he'd been a little bit more discerning in what he'd said. Yeah, I wish he'd been a little more discerning when he said you got to go and fight like hell, and if you don't, you won't have a country anymore. I wish he'd been a little bit more discerning when he set out a tweet when he knew that the Capitol had been overrun and his own vice president was fleeing with his entourage, when he said Mike Pence did not have the courage to do what needed to be done. I wish he'd been a little more discerning about that. He was pretty discerning the next day when he said that he denounced what had taken place as an atrocity and that the people would be held responsible. But then he wasn't very discerning when he began to back off of all of that and begin to say these people were heroes and political prisoners like Alexei Navalny and Alexander Solzhenitsyn and Nelson Mandela. And when he said they were hostages, like the people held by Hamas. A hostage is somebody who's been kidnapped and abducted by a terrorist or a criminal group and held for ransom. And he was just a little undiscerning when he described these people who'd had every benefit of American due process and American right to counsel and the right to testify if they want to, when he described them as hostages. What an abomination, as the gentleman says. What an abomination it was indeed. But look, we have the opportunity now to actually deal with one of the major issues that is arising right now because of this nightmare. And it is that there are people who were arrested and prosecuted and convicted for their crimes on January 6th who are now getting off of other crimes because of the pardon that they received from Donald Trump. They are being released from jail, from prosecution, by the Department of Justice for other crimes that they committed that were worse crimes than what they committed on January 6th. I'm going to introduce for the record an article. Department of Justice says Trump's January 6th pardon covers man convicted of possessing hand grenades, classified information. That's in Politico.
Without objection.
February 25th. Well, they went to arrest him for what was the relatively mild crime at the time of just trespassing into the U.S. Capitol and not leaving the Capitol. This is Jeremy Brown. But when they got to his house, what do you know? What do they find? Well, not just hand grenades, but an illegal modified assault weapon, an AR-15, a sawed-off shotgun, and classified reports that he had taken from the Army when he left the Army, okay? So all of those things added up to a 7-year criminal sentence when he was prosecuted for those things. But now the Department of Justice says that he should be immediately released based on President Donald Trump's mass pardon of the people, which included his pardon for trespassing at the Capitol. Now, I would hope that the gentleman from California, the gentleman from Wisconsin would agree with me. That is a matter squarely within the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee, whether people should be able to be released by the Department of Justice for offenses completely unrelated to January 6th because they were pardoned for things that happened on January 6th. And what a dangerous principle that is. I mean, will it lead to the creation of a private militia of people who owe their freedom to the President of the United States? These foot soldiers who are willing to do anything for the President and the Department of Justice because they seem to have a clean slate, including for crimes that had nothing to do with January 6th. Is that something we should look into? I think we should. I commend the gentlelady from California for bringing this amendment forward. That is absolutely something we need to examine because there's lots of other offenses that we've determined are out there with these people: child pornography, domestic violence, other arms charges. Do we really want to give people a get-out-of-jail-free card because they went to work for Donald Trump's orders and invocations on January 6, 2021? I yield back.